Berkley.
Hello, hi.
So first, I heard about the wildfires in Alberta. So how are you today?
Thank you. Yeah, we there are a lot of wildfires here, and actually, really sadly, one of the actresses in the film, Roseanne Superno, her house was burnt down, totally burnt down. So I'm hoping maybe we can get some fundraising or somehow tie this release of the film to get some support to her and her family. She lives in a Métis community, a settlement there, and they said pretty that entire community was like houses were just incinerated. So it's pretty shocking. I'll update that, or I'm hoping just to use some of this to, if she has a link or something, I'll get that out because I think just even those basic supplies become an issue.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Well,
we
you
need.
can just send that link later if you have one, and we'll
Okay, thank you.
share it.
Okay, thank you. The main characters in Dark Nature are Joy, and she's played by Hannah Emily Anderson. And she plays someone who's in the midst of extracting herself from just a very bad relationship with an ex-boyfriend. There's Carmen, who's played by Madison Walsh, and she's Joy's best friend. She's very athletic, a photographer, and is really trying to get her friend to just get over this relationship. And it's her idea to go on this hiking weekend. There's Dr. Dunlay. She's the therapist who runs this weekend retreat. There's Shayna. She's an ex-military woman who has some PTSD from her service. And Tara, who's played by Helen Belay. And she is a young woman whose story is she went through some traumas, and as a teenager, she was basically catfished online and sort of kidnapped. But we don't get into that part of her story, but that is her backstory. I chose to shoot it in this area because I'm from this area, and so is my producer, Michael Peterson. You know, this location is used, or this place is used as a location for a lot of films and a lot of TV, but it's very much seen as a location and nothing more. But there are a lot of independent filmmakers here, especially those working in horror, which is nice. There's a little horror ghetto. So I think for us, we want to work with the crews that we know. We want to work with our friends. And it's also just a really beautiful and wild place. There's vistas we have here that you see in the movie where it's completely, there's no people in any way you look. And that's not CGI. That's real. And so I think also for the actors and creating that sense with them, I wanted them to feel that sense of we're really out here, because I think you can feel that in the performance. I think really at its core, the hardest thing about shooting in remote locations is the wear and tear on the crew, your exposure to the elements, and being far away from supplies. So we had an important piece of equipment drop into the water on our water shoot day, and you can't just like run to the store and grab the camera store and grab a new version of it, because that's going to take, you know, at least 4 hours to get there back if there isn't even that piece of equipment. So things like that really add up, losing little bits of time here and there. It's hard to be outside if there's wind, there's sun, you're walking up and down hills, and through a 12-hour day, because unlike the French, we have really bad, I don't know what it's like in Montreal or in France, but it's very the hours here are very grueling in the film industry. It's 12 to 14-hour days is the average. And with an hour of travel to and from over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, people are just human, and it starts to wear people down. The animals, I think we did have a grizzly bear one day that was sort of circling the circus where we have all our trailers. And we saw him, so we were honking horns, we had blow horns, kind of like, move on. And he was just like, no, I'm just gonna kind of come a little closer. I think it smells really good. Um, so that was a little scary just because that's not typical behavior for a bear. Normally they're very adverse to seeing people, but you have a moment of shock where it's like, well, where is that one crew member? Like, we don't know where they are there, or they're at a different location by themselves, and there's a grizzly bear between us. Like, we need to get them. How do we get them and make sure they're safe? But we had safety protocols and ways that, you work around those kind of things. So that was kind of more the exciting thing. But I would say for me, the hardest was probably the night shoots, where even in the summer, it's -10 at 4 a.m. in the morning, and it's just feeling really, really tired, just being so cold. And I, was very happy when the night shoots were over. I think it took about, from beginning to work on it to being financed, just about 2 years, I want to say, or a year and a half. I think because of it being a horror, it is actually easier to find an audience. So it is easier to get some financing behind it. I think for a lot of people, of course, because I'm his first time director, it's a leap. So there's a lot of convincing people like, I can do it. So that was great. And I'm thankful to my producer, Mike Peterson. He really, really helped with that. And he's got more experience making films. So he had a lot of connections that he was able to talk to and sell the project about. We also had telefilm funding through the Indigenous stream, which was what made the movie possible. So that process is very different than, I think, the regular stream for telefilm, because it's a community jury, and the jury will take the script and come back with a lot of questions, like about representation or intention. And so I would sort of have a back and forth with them, talking about why I made decisions I made and my plan. So that was really good, actually. It's very hard, when you get a list back of questions that are hard questions, and it means I have to change things in the script and things that I creatively agreed with. But it also really helps clarify what I was saying and getting used to talking about the film. So it's hard, but I think it's good. It's a good process. Well, that's a great question. And I really enjoyed working with the actors and working on their characters with them. We had a lot of conversations. And so they would come with questions, and if there was something they didn't understand, we could talk through it. I really trust the intelligence of actors. I think to be a good actor, you have to be a pretty smart person. Each actress had a different way of entering the character. So for example, Madison Walsh, she's also a writer. So if she wants to contribute something or understands a story point or thinks something will work better in another way, she's really able to speak about that as a writer, which is really nice and really great. And then with Hannah, she had her questions, but I think she's just very talented. That's what she does. And they've all been trained. Roseanne is the only one, I think, who didn't go to like a school, but she has been acting since she was a child and on set. So her understanding just of how to communicate for camera is very, very advanced and very, very good. One thing we did that I really liked and wish we had more time to do, I love that Mike Lee's way of working, where he gets to workshop with the actors for a year, then he makes the script, and that's the script they shoot. That would be my ideal way of working, but we just don't have that budget, or we didn't on this film. But one thing we did is, when all the actors arrived, everyone except for the character of Joy, who wouldn't have been in the therapy group in the story, but the other characters or the other actors, we did a real live group therapy session with a real therapist, a very good therapist in Calgary, but they were in character. So that was a day where we just got to see how would she work with this group, and they really threw some big emotions at her, and it got tense. Like, I wish we could have filmed that. Like, it was they did such a great job and brought all this sort of performance. I think they were also showing each other, like, this is what my character is and what I can do. And that gave us a lot of backstory, and it especially helped the character Kyra Harper for Dr. Dunley, because I think her instinct was to be very maternal with the characters, but a therapist isn't necessarily maternal. She can have that, but what the therapist, Dr. Rachel, that we worked with, showed was just how to sort of be inquisitive, maybe more than just caring. Like, she would do things in a caring way, but she has very good boundaries and doesn't react. So I think sometimes being maternal is even a reaction to someone's emotion. Someone cries, oh, you're like reacting. Whereas the therapist that we had, she'd be like, oh, okay, I see your feeling. Are you feeling upset? I'm noticing you're raising your voice, and do you want to talk about that? So I think that was very good for Kyra to see, and we were able to reference that on set quite a few times. Honestly, the deadline. We knew the film was over because we had to stop. There's so many productions shooting here that the sound houses are very, very busy, and they're doing really big shows. So we had little windows, and we actually lost our first sound house that we had. They just kind of were like, oh, sorry, we got like a way bigger project. And so we lost them, but we were able to get another one, which is called Propeller, and they're incredible. And so we were like, yes, we want Propeller. And they're like, we have this little window. So March 4th, we need it by March 4th so that we can work on it for this month. That's your window. So I personally would have liked to take a break and come back and give it another edit, but that's what the reality is. It had to get done for festival deadlines and just all the business side of it. You have to make those deadlines. So yeah, I think, yes, if you're, Nolan or someone else, like, you get to choose, but I didn't feel it was really my choice. The cave scene, the interior of the cave and the interior of the tents was done in the studio. Everything else, pretty much, except for the apartments and her house, is done outside. And I would say I just was really lucky to have Gerald Lim. He was our cinematographer, and he just is an expert at light. I mean, that's also what he does, but he, I think, is at a very, even higher than most cinematographers. He really understands his equipment, and he really understands light, and he really understands what you can do and what you can't do. So there's certain things we really planned for certain times of days, and those were built in the schedule. So when they're going into the cavern, and that there's a very small window when the sun's at a place that will actually give that canyon any light. Most of the time it's like pretty dark. So we had that booked for a certain time. For the night shoots, we actually had some neat equipment that we had this giant helium balloon that it's a lighting balloon, you fill with helium, it goes up, and then you can move it around. So that's quite nice for the outdoors, although of course you have to bring out the helium tanks, and those are very heavy and very expensive. We found those locations based on their proximity to the road as well. So even though we were out in nature, we were shooting away from the road, but close enough to the road that we could have our generators parked and hook up some really big lights. So that was the first time I'd actually directed a night scene that was lit. And Gerald really showed me. And if you look at that night scene, there's so much depth and so much highlighting on certain sides of the trees that you can actually see how far it goes, whereas normally it'd just be like dark. But Gerald really, really lit that beautifully. And I think his lighting in the apartment was really incredible because it's quite a big space. That took them about 9 hours to light. And he really fought a lot and fought really hard for getting the time and getting the equipment. I worked as a reader for Likely Story and also for Cooperstown, which was Philip Seymour Hoffman's company in New York. And sorry, my dog's coming to say hi. And I think one of the things that's so great about that is seeing how few good scripts there are. For each of those companies, every script is solicited. So it's coming from an agent. It has to be vetted before it even gets there. And for Cooperstown, it was with writers who had a relationship with Phil. Thank you, Suma. And to read as many as I did, there's probably maybe three actually, of maybe 300 that I read that I remember, or that I thought, oh, this is good. Most were really bad. And that actually, so what that taught me was just go for it, because it can be very intimidating to reach out to agents or these big companies. But I think if you believe in your vision and, you can make it good, you will be in the minority. As a reader, I really would be bumped by anything that seemed careless or sloppy, punctuation, spelling. And I remember talking to one of the executives and, well, I don't know if this writer really cares. It's kind of bad. And they're like, honestly, if it comes from like writer we want to work with, like, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Actually, it really doesn't matter. It's just a blueprint. So I think just having a good story that stays focused is very, very rare, like focused on the theme.
And so then you came back to Alberta, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I shot my thesis film so I went to Columbia for my MFA in directing, and then got the idea that I should shoot my feature here and shoot it on an oil rig, which, why not? Why not make it a little harder? And so I came here, and then my cinematographer for my reshoots, and I thought he was very handsome and he was very kind, and we ended up falling in love, and now we're married. And so he kind of grabbed me. He got me to come back. And I thought, and we still are looking at moving sometimes to other places, but there's a very high quality of life in Calgary for artists and a good community. So we're happy as well right now. But yes, I didn't think I'd be moving back to Calgary. But in some ways, I think it's, for someone at the beginning of your career, it's almost easier to be here, because when I was in LA or New York, I don't have those just generational connections to, oh, you have a place I can shoot at, and there's also not the government funding. So here in Canada, there is that support to get us launched. I heard from many people there isn't as much support to get to that next tier. So a lot of support for beginning filmmakers, and then in the middle, it's less and less, but I guess that's the reality. Like, you have to keep being one of the few if you want to go forward, which seems to be a bit of luck, a bit of fate, as well as, of course, your hard work and your ideas. I do not want to shoot any more movies in the mountains on a low budget. I do have a snowboarding movie that I've always wanted to make, but I'll put that on the back burner until or unless, if I had my own trailer, or I don't know what, an assistant, something to help. It's just so hard in the mountains. But I'm actually most excited about an adaptation I'm doing of the book called Half Breed by Maria Campbell. And if anyone has not read it, I really recommend it as a read. It's just so well written. She's such an incredible writer and artist, and it's her story. It's a memoir of growing up as a young Métis woman in the 40s to the early 70s, essentially. Her beginning of her life was a very traditional life and a very old way of life that doesn't really exist anymore. So it's quite amazing, the characters she portrays and the culture that she shows, and just the scope of it. So I'm working on that with Banger Films in Toronto, and we are just finalizing the paperwork on our option. I'm really hoping that will be a limited series. So that's going to take up quite a bit of time, but hopefully, if we do 6 or 7 episodes, there's elements that I would love to bring from horror and thriller into that. I really want each episode to sort of stand on its own, and to find directors to bring on that can really play with that. It's like a series of movies, of shorter 1-hour movies is how I see it. She's that kind of storyteller that she just brings you in. I'm really excited to work with her. She's really a hero of mine as well. So I'm just hope to do it justice and get it off the ground.